What if the greatest library in the world wasn't built by human hands, but by the earth itself, rising mile after mile into the clouds, holding secrets in its stone, its silence, its very soul? For thousands of years, human beings have looked up at mountains not just as challenges to be climbed or landscapes to be admired, but as sacred keepers of wisdom, ancient libraries encoded with truths far beyond ordinary understanding. These are places where myth and mountain meet, where the boundary between earth and sky feels thin, almost transparent. From the snow-capped Himalayas to the volcanic slopes of Mount Shasta, from the lonely peak of Sinai to the holy mass of Mount Kailash, cultures across time and geography have whispered the same idea, that mountains are more than rock. They are living archives, they hold stories, they guard revelations, and they have been waiting for us to listen. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to uncover what it really means when we say that mountains were once libraries. We'll explore how their layers of rock became pages in a cosmic book, how their alignment with the stars turned them into celestial calendars, and how their isolation made them the perfect vessels for spiritual and ecological knowledge. We'll meet the deities said to dwell on their summits, decode the petroglyphs carved into their faces, and retrace the steps of pilgrims who walked for months just to hear the mountain's silent teaching. This isn't just about geology or mythology alone, it's about the space where both converge, where human wonder meets the grandeur of nature, and where forgotten wisdom might still be recovered, if only we know how to look. By the time we reach the end of our exploration, you won't see mountains the same way again. You'll understand why our ancestors revered them, why so many traditions describe them as bridges between worlds, and why even today, something in us still stirs when we stand before their majesty. This is an invitation to see the world through older eyes, to rediscover a sense of awe, to reconnect with landscapes that have long been silent teachers. So come with me, let's walk these ancient paths together, and let's listen to what the mountains have been trying to tell us all along. It's no coincidence that some of humanity's most profound stories began on a mountain. In the quiet, thin air above the world, something shifts. The everyday fades away, and a deeper kind of knowing seems possible. Across the globe, from the earliest civilizations to modern spiritual seekers, mountains have been universally recognized as far more than just impressive landforms. They are powerful symbols deeply embedded in our collective psyche, their sheer physicality reaching up from the solid earth to pierce the heavens naturally inspired ancient peoples to see them as the ultimate bridge between realms. They became the meeting point for the human and the divine, the mortal and the eternal, the known world and the mysterious beyond. Consider Mount Olympus in ancient Greece. It wasn't just a picturesque backdrop for tales of Zeus and Hera. It was the literal home of the gods, a place inaccessible to ordinary humans where the very fabric of the universe was governed. The Greeks didn't look at that peak and simply see rock and snow. They saw a celestial palace, a realm of ultimate power and order. Similarly, in Hinduism and Buddhism, Mount Kailash is not merely a mountain. It is revered as the sacred abode of Lord Shiva, the center of the entire universe, and a destination for pilgrims who believe that merely glimpsing its slopes can cleanse a lifetime of sin. This isn't just respect for nature's grandeur, it's a complete cosmological interpretation where the mountain is the axis around which all of creation spins. This pattern repeats itself in traditions separated by vast oceans and millennia. For the Maori of New Zealand, the mountain Taranaki is a deeply respected ancestor, a living being with its own story and spirit. In Japanese culture, Mount Fuji is a sacred symbol of national identity, a source of artistic inspiration and a dwelling place for kami or spirits. The Native American tribes of the Great Plains viewed places like the Black Hills as the very heart of the world, a sacred sanctuary given to them by the Great Spirit. What's fascinating is that these cultures had no contact with each other, yet they all arrived at a strikingly similar conclusion, that the highest places are holy places. This universal reverence likely stems from a combination of awe, isolation, and perspective. Mountains are imposing. They dominate the landscape, often shrouded in cloud and weather, speaking a language of thunder and wind. Their scale alone evokes a sense of humility and wonder in any observer. Their isolation creates a natural sanctuary, a place set apart from the hustle of daily life, perfect for contemplation, vision quests, and receiving revelation. And from their summits, one gains a literal higher perspective, seeing the world from above, understanding the connection between valleys and rivers, and feeling closer to the sky. This physical experience translates perfectly into a spiritual metaphor. Ascending the mountain is akin to ascending toward enlightenment, leaving the mundane behind in search of higher truth. This shared intuition that mountains are keepers of a cosmic order is the essential foundation for the incredible idea that they function as libraries. If a mountain is a bridge to the divine, then it follows that it could also be a repository for divine knowledge. The stories, laws, and spiritual insights revealed on its slopes weren't seen as human inventions, but as discoveries of eternal truths already encoded into the very stone and silence. The mountain, in its eternal patience, holds this wisdom safe, waiting for those prepared to make the ascent, both physically and spiritually, to begin reading its ancient, layered texts. But if mountains are the great symbolic libraries of our myths, how exactly were they read? How does a silent, stone giant made of mineral and magma become a keeper of knowledge? The answer lies not just in the spiritual symbolism our ancestors assigned to these places, but in their breathtaking physical reality. Ancient peoples were astute observers of the natural world, and they looked at the complex geology of a mountain and saw a story waiting to be told. They didn't have our scientific terminology, but they possessed a deep, poetic understanding that the earth itself was a document, and its most dramatic features were its most important chapters. Take, for example, the sheer, visible layers of sedimentary rock that make up so many of the world's great peaks. To a modern geologist, these strata are a timeline, each band representing a different era in the planet's deep history, compressed under immense pressure. To an ancient culture, this looked remarkably like the pages of a colossal book, stacked one on top of the other. The idea that each layer could hold the wisdom of a different age, a different world, was a powerful and intuitive metaphor. In the lore surrounding Northern California's Mount Shasta, a peak revered by many indigenous tribes and modern spiritual seekers alike, the mountain is often described as an interdimensional library. Its distinct layers are said to be the shelves of this library, holding the records of lost continents like Lemuria or the accumulated knowledge of advanced ancient civilizations. Similarly, in the Andes, the Incas and their predecessors saw the stratified cliffs not as inert stone, but as Pacarina's sacred places of origin and emergence, where the foundational stories of their people were physically embedded into the world. Then there is the incredible, terrifying power of volcanic mountains. A dormant volcano is a silent guardian, but an erupting one is a furious prophet. The lava flowing down its slopes was not merely seen as destructive, it was viewed as a purifying fire, a creative force that simultaneously wiped the slate clean and laid down a new layer of earth, a new page in the planet's story. For cultures living in the shadow of volcanoes, like those around Mount Etna in Sicily or Popocatépetl in Mexico, these eruptions were the mountain speaking. The rumble was its voice, the ash cloud its message, and the glowing lava its revealed truth, flowing hot and brilliant from the heart of the world. This cyclical process of destruction and renewal became a central theme in their myths, mirroring the cycles of death and rebirth, of forgetting and remembering. The mountain wasn't just a setting for these stories, it was an active character, a divine agent that chose when to reveal its deepest secrets and when to keep them hidden under a cap of rock and snow. Even the minerals and crystals found within mountains contributed to this idea of encoded knowledge. Quartz, often formed in the veins of high peaks, was seen across cultures as a stone of memory and communication. Its ability to conduct energy and its use in modern technology for storing data feels almost like an echo of an ancient intuition that the bones of the earth could literally hold information. Fossils, too, discovered weathering out of mountainsides, were interpreted not as prehistoric animals but as stone imprints left by gods, or as messages from a time before humans walked the earth. Every geological feature, from a peculiar rock formation that resembled an animal to a hidden cavern system leading deep into the dark, was a sentence in a larger narrative. The landscape was never just a landscape, it was a text, and our ancestors were its most devoted readers, constantly interpreting its meaning and finding their own place within its grand, unfolding story. But the idea of mountains as libraries goes far beyond their symbolic power or their readable geology. There is another, even more precise layer to this encoding one that speaks to a profound understanding of order, mathematics, and the very architecture of the cosmos. This is the realm of sacred geometry, where the physical form of a mountain is not a random act of nature, but a deliberate expression of universal principles, a perfect shape holding profound meaning. When ancient mystics and builders looked at certain peaks, they didn't just see a mountain, they saw a diagram of creation itself. Perhaps the most stunning example is Mount Kailash in Tibet. To the human eye, it appears almost unnaturally perfect, a majestic four-sided pyramid of black rock, its faces aligned almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions. It is so symmetrical, so geometrically precise, that many legends say it was not formed by tectonic forces but was instead created by divine hands. In Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions, this isn't just a coincidence. Kailash is the ultimate axis mundi, the world pillar, and its pyramidal form is a mirror of the cosmic mountain Meru, the central axis of all universes in Vedic cosmology. Its shape is the key to its function. The geometry itself is the language that explains its role as the stable, unmoving center around which all of reality revolves. To encounter Kailash is to encounter a living theorem in stone, a lesson in cosmic stability and order. This phenomenon isn't isolated to a single peak. Look at the Grand Teton in Wyoming, which rises in a stark, dramatic triangle from the flat valley floor, or the Matterhorn in the Alps, another iconic natural pyramid. These shapes resonate deeply within us because they reflect the fundamental building blocks of the universe found in sacred geometry, the triangle and the pyramid, symbols of aspiration, balance, and the integration of the earthly with the spiritual. But the encoding gets even more intricate when we consider not just single mountains, but entire ranges. There are compelling observations that the layout of the three Tetons mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt, just as the Giza pyramids in Egypt are famously argued to do. This suggests that ancient observers might have seen these mountain ranges as terrestrial maps of celestial patterns, giant earthly constellations set in stone. This concept of mirroring the heavens on Earth points to a sophisticated encoded astronomical knowledge, a mountain that precisely aligns with the sunrise on the summer solstice, or whose shadow touches a specific point in the valley on the equinox, becomes a giant, immovable clock and calendar. It encodes critical information about the passage of time, the changing of seasons, and the cycles of the stars, information essential for agriculture, navigation, and ritual. The mountain's fixed position in the landscape makes it the perfect, permanent reference point for this cosmic data. Its very presence is a continuous broadcast of astronomical information, available to anyone who knows how to read its silent, shadowed language. This perspective invites a radical shift in how we view the natural world. It suggests that the recognition of these geometric and celestial patterns was intentional. Our ancestors weren't just projecting myths onto passive landscapes. They were discerning an inherent intelligence within nature itself. They believed the universe was constructed according to a divine geometric blueprint, and mountains were some of the clearest, most powerful expressions of that blueprint on Earth. Their forms were seen as holding mathematical and symbolic keys to understanding everything from the nature of God to the structure of the atom. So a pilgrimage to a sacred mountain was never just a journey to a beautiful place. It was a journey into the heart of a cosmic equation, a walking meditation into the very source code of reality, where one could literally stand upon a principle of sacred geometry and feel its truth resonating through the stone beneath their feet. Long before the invention of writing, human societies developed incredibly sophisticated methods for preserving vast amounts of essential information, and the landscape itself became their most trusted hard drive. For countless oral cultures around the world, mountains were not silent sentinels but dynamic, interactive mnemonic devices. Every crack in a cliff face, every spring bubbling from a mountainside, every uniquely shaped peak served as a memory trigger, a physical bookmark in a giant, open-air library of knowledge. A specific rock outcrop might cue the memory of a creation story that explained the people's origin. A particular high meadow, bursting with flowers at a certain time of year, would signal the start of a seasonal migration or a specific hunting ritual. The mountain's immutable presence guaranteed that the data stored within its features would remain constant, a permanent and reliable reference point for a culture's entire worldview. This practice of weaving knowledge directly into the terrain was a global phenomenon. The Navajo people of the American Southwest, for instance, define their homeland by 4 sacred mountains that mark the cardinal directions. Each mountain is not just a boundary but a repository of specific teachings. The stories associated with these peaks detail proper social conduct, healing practices, and the sacred history of the Navajo universe. To travel across this land is to move through a living narrative, where the very hills and valleys are imbued with moral and spiritual instruction. Similarly, the Inca of the Andes organized their empire around a system of huacas, sacred places that included specific mountain peaks, springs, and unusual stones. These huacas were nodes in a vast spiritual and administrative network. The mountains, especially the towering Apu or mountain spirits, were revered as protectors and providers. Their melting snows fed the rivers that irrigated terraced fields, and their presence dictated the agricultural calendar. The knowledge of when to plant and when to harvest, which paths to take for trade, and how to appease the powerful spirits of the weather was all encoded in the stories and songs connected to these immense landforms. Perhaps the most profound example of this oral encoding is found in the Aboriginal Australian concept of the songlines, or dreaming tracks. A songline is a pathway across the land that maps the route taken by ancestral creator beings during the dreamtime. Critically, these routes are remembered and navigated through song. Each verse of a song corresponds to a specific feature in the landscape, a waterhole, a stand of trees, or very often a mountain or a hill. A distinct, dramatic mountain range might form an entire stanza or chapter in a song that is hundreds of miles long. By singing the song while walking the land, an individual can navigate across the entire continent, as the lyrics literally describe the landmarks they will encounter. The mountain, in this context, is far more than a navigation aid. It is a crucial note in a cosmic melody, a physical manifestation of a story that is both a map and a sacred law. The knowledge encoded is holistic. It includes the location of water and food sources, the boundaries of tribal lands, and the spiritual laws that govern relationships between all living things. To know the song is to know the land, and to care for the land is to honor the song. This interactive form of knowledge preservation ensured that critical information was not just memorized but experienced. It created a living, participatory library where one had to physically engage with the material, to walk the paths, to touch the stones, to see the changing light on the slopes at different times of year. This method of learning was deeply embodied and sensory, making the knowledge incredibly durable and resistant to being lost. The mountain became an active teacher, its lessons revealed only to those who moved through its domain with respect and attentiveness. This tradition reveals a stunningly elegant system where ecology, mythology, and survival are fused into a single, seamless whole, proving that the greatest libraries are those without walls, where every visitor must become a reader, a singer, and a participant in the story itself. While the use of mountains as symbolic and oral libraries is profound, some cultures took a far more direct approach, actively turning the very stone of the mountains into pages of a permanent record. This is where the metaphor of the mountain as a library becomes stunningly literal, with human hands collaborating with the rock to inscribe knowledge that could withstand the erosion of centuries. Across the globe, from the high deserts of the Americas to the windswept plateaus of Asia, ancient peoples climbed to these majestic, isolated places not just to seek wisdom, but to carve it directly into the mountain's skin, creating an archive in stone for future generations or for the gods themselves. Consider the breathtaking sight of Medicine Mountain in Wyoming, home to the medicine wheel. This isn't a wheel in the traditional sense, but an intricate pattern of stones laid out in a circular shape with 28 spokes, radiating from a central cairn, perched at an elevation of almost 10,000 feet. The effort to carry these stones and precisely arrange them at such a high, remote location speaks volumes about its importance. Archaeologists and indigenous elders understand this site as a sophisticated astronomical observatory. The alignments between the cairns and specific stones mark the rising and setting points of the sun during the summer solstice, as well as the heliacal rising of key stars like Sirius, Aldebaran, and Rigel. This wasn't just art, it was a complex celestial calendar etched onto the mountain's summit. It encoded critical knowledge for predicting seasonal changes, organizing ceremonies, and navigating by the stars, a veritable user manual for the cosmos, written in a language of rock and alignment, placed high in the sky where the connection to the heavens was clearest. Similarly, the Marcahuasi Plateau in Peru, situated at a dizzying altitude of over 12,000 feet, presents a landscape that seems half sculpted by nature and half by intent. The plateau is scattered with massive stone figures that resemble human faces, animals, and mythological beings when viewed from specific angles at certain times of day, particularly under the dramatic shadows of the equinox sunrise. While some formations are natural, many show clear signs of human enhancement, careful carving, and chiseling to accentuate the features. These are not simple doodles, they are a complex gallery of stone, believed by some researchers to represent a vast repository of ancient knowledge about cosmology, biology, and spiritual traditions. The extreme effort required to live and work at this altitude suggests that the knowledge encoded here was considered paramount, worth the immense physical hardship required to access and contribute to this open-air library. The location of these inscriptions is a critical part of their meaning. Placing a petroglyph panel high on a cliff face or an astronomical marker on a remote peak was a deliberate choice. It meant that accessing this knowledge required a journey, a pilgrimage. It separated the casual observer from the dedicated seeker. This implies that the knowledge itself was tiered. Some information was for the entire community, while the deepest secrets were reserved for those who had undergone the necessary training, initiation, or spiritual preparation to make the arduous climb. The mountain, in this sense, acted as a natural guardian of its own information, protecting profound truths from being trivialized or misused. The act of climbing to reach them was the first lesson in humility, dedication, and respect. Furthermore, the medium of stone was chosen for its permanence. Unlike parchment, papyrus, or oral stories that could evolve over time, stone endures. A carving made 1,000 years ago can still be seen today, its message frozen in time. This durability made mountains the ideal place to deposit information that a culture deemed absolutely essential to preserve across generations: creation myths, warnings of past cataclysms, star maps, and sacred laws. The mountain became a trusted, immutable hard drive, ensuring that even if the civilization that created the inscriptions faded away, their core understanding of the world would remain, waiting on the silent rock face for someone from a distant future to finally look up and begin to decipher its message. This tangible practice beautifully bridges the gap between the metaphorical idea of a mountain holding knowledge and the physical reality of it being a written, enduring record, proving that our ancestors were not just passive readers of the natural world, but active authors collaborating with it to create a legacy in stone. Perhaps the most captivating extension of this idea that mountains are vast libraries is found not in what is written on their surfaces, but in the tantalizing legends of what is believed to lie hidden deep within them. Across the globe, cultures share remarkably similar stories of secret cities, enlightened societies, and entire subterranean worlds concealed inside the Earth's greatest peaks, accessible only through hidden caverns or during moments of spiritual transcendence. These are not tales of mere treasure vaults, but of entire ecosystems of wisdom, where the mountain's primary function shifts from a readable text to an impenetrable vault, guarding its most precious contents until the world is worthy of their revelation. In the high, thin air of the Himalayas, the legend of Shambhala, or Shangri-La, endures as one of the most powerful examples. Tibetan Buddhist texts describe it not as a mythical paradise but as a real, physical kingdom hidden in a remote valley, encircled by a ring of snowy mountains. It is said to be a society of profoundly enlightened beings who have perfected a technology of consciousness, living in peace and possessing knowledge that would revolutionize our world. The path to Shambhala is not found on any ordinary map. It is described as a journey that is as much internal as it is external, requiring the seeker to purify their mind and intentions before the mountain pathways will even reveal themselves. The mountains here act as a divine filtering mechanism, ensuring that only those who have achieved a certain level of spiritual maturity can access the advanced wisdom within, protecting that knowledge from being used for selfish or destructive ends. This theme of a hidden, inner world repeats itself an ocean away in the legends of the Andes. The indigenous peoples of Peru and Bolivia speak of Paititi, a legendary lost city of gold and immense knowledge, believed to be concealed within the remote, cloud-shrouded mountains of the eastern Andes. Similarly, the concept of Uku Pacha, or the inner world, is a fundamental part of the Andean cosmological vision. it is not a place of darkness or fear, but a sacred, subterranean realm of origin and potential, accessed through caves and mountain springs. This inner world is the home of ancestral spirits and the source of generative life force, and it is guarded by the Apu, the towering mountain spirits themselves. The mountain, in this tradition, is the literal gateway between our outer world and this inner dimension of pure potential and ancient memory. What unites these diverse legends from Tibet to the Andes is the consistent role of the mountain as both guardian and gateway. It is the perfect protector for this esoteric knowledge. Its sheer physicality presents a formidable barrier to the casual explorer, while its spiritual significance deters those with impure motives. The myth suggests that the greatest truths about existence, the universe, and our place within it are too potent to be left in the open. They must be preserved in a state of perfect integrity, safe from the corruption, dogma, and short-sightedness that often define human history. The enlightened beings said to inhabit these realms, whether called Mahatmas, ascended masters, or ancestral spirits, are not hoarding this knowledge. They are its librarians, patiently waiting for humanity to collectively evolve to a state of wisdom and compassion where we can responsibly receive and apply these advanced understandings without causing harm. This narrative speaks to a profound and universal psychological insight, that the quest for ultimate knowledge is inherently a heroic journey. The seeker must face not only the physical challenges of the mountain, but also the inner challenges of their own ego, fear, and ignorance. The mountain in these myths becomes the ultimate test, its hidden passages only open to those who have conquered themselves first. This transforms the concept of a library from a passive repository into an interactive, almost sentient, educational institution. The mountain doesn't just hold information, it evaluates the student. It withholds its deepest secrets not out of spite, but out of a divine pedagogical strategy, understanding that some lessons can only be learned by those who have diligently prepared for them. This makes the legends of hidden mountain realms perhaps the most sophisticated expression of the ancient library concept, where the architecture of the earth itself is designed to teach us the most important lesson of all, that true wisdom is earned, not found. Yet this profound connection between peak and cosmos extends far beyond symbolic meaning into the realm of breathtakingly precise function. High atop countless sacred mountains, we find evidence that our ancestors transformed these natural towers into the world's most stable and sophisticated astronomical instruments. They looked at a mountain's fixed, permanent presence on the horizon and saw the perfect anchor for a celestial calendar, a massive stone structure engineered not by human hands, but by the earth itself, and then expertly read by those who understood its silent language. This is where the mountain's role as a library becomes incredibly practical, encoding not just spiritual truths but vital, life-sustaining data into the very alignment of its slopes and shadows. Take Mount Graham in Arizona, known to the indigenous Apache as Dizil Enchasi An, which translates to Big Seated Mountain. This peak is far more than a prominent landform. It is a central pillar in a complex astronomical system. Specific points on its massive bulk align with the rising and setting sun during the solstices and equinoxes, casting shadows that touch specific rocks or valleys at those precise moments. For the people who watched this mountain, its changing face throughout the year was a reliable, immutable almanac. The day the sun's first light touched a certain notch on the eastern ridge might signal the time to begin planting certain crops. The evening it set directly behind the summit could mark the start of a ceremonial season or the preparation for winter migrations. The mountain did not merely mark time, it dictated the rhythm of life, harmonizing human activity with the unwavering cycles of the solar year. This practice of celestial encoding was a global phenomenon, on the other side of the world, atop the majestic peak of Mount Nemrut in Turkey, King Antiochus I of Commagene built a breathtaking sanctuary around 2,000 years ago. He ordered the construction of a giant tumulus flanked by colossal statues of gods and himself, but the true genius of the site is in its orientation. The entire complex is meticulously aligned with astronomical events. On the days of the equinox, an observer standing in a specific location would witness the sun appear to set directly between the statues, a dramatic spectacle that fused royal authority with cosmic order. This was a powerful statement, declaring that the king's rule was in sync with the fundamental mechanics of the universe itself, a message set in stone for all eternity against the backdrop of the sky. The precision involved in these sites reveals a depth of astronomical knowledge that we are only now fully appreciating. These ancient sky watchers didn't just have a casual understanding of the sun's path. They possessed a sophisticated grasp of the 18.6-year lunar cycle, the subtle precession of the equinoxes, and the fixed positions of key navigational stars. They understood that a mountain, unlike a wooden post or a temporary structure, would never move or decay. By using its permanent features as their reference points, they created a scientific instrument that would remain accurate for millennia. This wasn't guesswork, it was a science of exact observation where the mountain served as the gnomon on a giant sundial and the surrounding landscape became the clock face. This celestial knowledge was seamlessly woven into the fabric of culture. A solstice marker wasn't just a date on a rock, it was the trigger for a community-wide harvest festival, a time of thanksgiving that reinforced social bonds. The heliacal rising of a star like Sirius, first glimpsed just before dawn over a specific peak, might signal the coming rains necessary for the survival of herds. This information was so critical that it was embedded into myth and ritual to ensure it was remembered and passed down. The story of a hero chasing a celestial beast across the sky, whose path was mirrored by a mountain range, was both an entertaining tale and a vital mnemonic for remembering a stellar event. The mountain, therefore, became the central character in a living, interactive library where astronomy, agriculture, mythology, and community law were all part of one interconnected system of wisdom, all harmonized with the eternal dance of the heavens above. But to truly grasp the immense power of this concept, we need to journey beyond any single mountain and into the very architecture of the universe as imagined by our ancestors. This brings us to one of the most profound and universal ideas in human mythology, the Axis Mundi, the world pillar, the cosmic mountain that stands at the absolute center of all creation. This isn't just a sacred peak, it is the ultimate library because it is the source from which all knowledge, all life, and all reality itself is believed to flow. It is the central pole that connects every layer of existence from the deepest underworld to the highest heavens, and in doing so, it contains the complete record of everything. In Hinduism, this mountain is Mount Meru, described in breathtakingly precise detail in ancient texts. It is said to be the nucleus of the entire cosmos, around which all the planets, including our own, revolve. Its summit is the abode of the god Brahma and the center of the celestial city, while its roots extend down into the infernal regions. The sacred peak of Kailash, which we discussed earlier, is considered to be the physical manifestation of this divine Meru on earth. Similarly, in ancient Zoroastrianism, the great mountain Hara Berizeti was seen as the first of all mountains, created by the divinity Ahura Mazda. It was the pivot of the world, the place around which the stars revolved, and from its peaks flowed all the waters of the world. These are not just stories about impressive geological features. They are complex cosmological maps describing the universe as having a defined center, a stable point of reference in an otherwise chaotic expanse. This idea of a central world mountain is astonishingly global. The ancient Greeks spoke of Mount Olympus as the home of the gods, but they also knew of a more mystical peak called Omphalos, the navel of the world, marked by a sacred stone at Delphi, which was believed to be the exact center of the earth. In Norse mythology, the immense world tree Yggdrasil performs a similar function, its branches holding the 9 realms and its roots drinking from the wells of fate and wisdom. But it is often depicted as growing on or from a great mountain, fusing the two powerful symbols. For the indigenous peoples of Siberia, a sacred pole or mountain stands at the center of their shamanic cosmos, and it is by climbing this axis that the shaman's soul can travel to the upper or lower worlds to retrieve knowledge or heal the sick. So what does this mean for the mountain's role as a library? If the axis Mundi is the central conduit connecting all realms, then it follows that it would also be the primary channel through which information and energy pass. Its peak, brushing against the realm of the pure, unchanging ideals of the gods, holds the most elevated spiritual truths and the blueprints for creation. Its middle, our earthly world, is filled with the practical knowledge of nature, survival, and community, and its roots, reaching deep into the underworld, tap into the wisdom of the ancestors, the memories of the past, and the secrets of death and rebirth. A seeker who journeys to such a place isn't just visiting a holy site. They are, in a metaphorical and spiritual sense, plugging into the main server of the universe. They are positioning themselves at the one point where they can potentially access any layer of knowledge, from the most practical to the most profoundly metaphysical. This is why pilgrimages to these Axis Mundi peaks are considered so transformative. The physical act of circumambulating Mount Kailash or climbing Mount Fuji is an external reenactment of an internal, spiritual process, the ascent of consciousness. Each step is a movement along this central axis, a deliberate effort to move one's awareness from the mundane concerns of the earthly realm toward the higher, more refined states of being represented by the summit. The mountain, in its silent, imposing presence, provides the literal and figurative path for this evolution. It is a library where the books are not on shelves, but are instead encoded into the very act of the journey itself, and the greatest insights are granted not by reading, but by undergoing the transformative experience of the ascent. This universal motif elevates the mountain from a simple keeper of secrets to the very structural framework of reality, the ultimate multidimensional repository where every truth, from every plane of existence, is waiting to be discovered. This journey of transformation, where the raw material of the self is purified into its highest state, finds one of its most powerful metaphors in the Western esoteric traditions of alchemy and Hermeticism. Here, the mountain is far more than a setting. It becomes the central symbol for the entire spiritual process, an external representation of the internal, arduous path to enlightenment. Alchemy, at its heart, was never truly about turning literal lead into literal gold. It was a sophisticated symbolic language, a code describing the purification of the human soul from its base, chaotic state represented by the raw, unrefined ore of the mountain, into a state of perfected consciousness and wisdom, the philosopher's stone or spiritual gold. The mountain, in its immense, layered, and challenging form, was the perfect natural analogue for this great work. Ancient texts like the Hermetica, a cornerstone of Western mystical thought, frequently describe the mountain as the chosen place for revelation and divine encounter. It was upon the mountaintop that the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus was said to have received his profound insights into the nature of the cosmos, the famous maxim, "As above, so below." This wasn't a casual choice of scenery. The isolation of the peak represented a separation from the distractions and illusions of the mundane world, the below. The clarity and proximity to the heavens, the above, facilitated a direct connection to divine principles. Philosophers and alchemists seeking their own enlightenment would retreat to such isolated places, understanding that the physical journey mirrored the psychological one. The solitude forced a confrontation with the self, and the sheer effort of the ascent became a metaphor for the discipline required to master one's own baser instincts and desires. Every step of the climb corresponds to a stage in the alchemical process and the soul's evolution. The base of the mountain, often shrouded in mist and tangled with vegetation, represents the initial state of nigredo, or blackening, a state of confusion, primal matter, and the first dark night of the soul. As the seeker ascends, they encounter challenges, just as the alchemist's matter is subjected to fire and purification. This is the stage of albedo, or whitening, where insights begin to dawn and clarity emerges. The traveler might reach a plateau, a place of temporary peace and understanding, only to see another, steeper cliff face ahead, representing the next challenge of inner development. The final, grueling push to the summit, battling thin air and exhaustion, parallels the ultimate stage of rubedo, or reddening, the final fusion of spirit and matter, resulting in the coveted gold of spiritual realization and the achievement of the magnum opus, the great work. This allegorical encoding turns the entire physical geography of a mountain into a detailed, three-dimensional map for psychological and spiritual evolution. A treacherous scree slope isn't just a dangerous path, it is the perilous process of confronting one's own fears and doubts. A sudden cliff face represents a seemingly insurmountable inner obstacle that requires a leap of faith or a new perspective to overcome. The breathtaking view from the summit is not just a reward for physical effort, it is the symbolic attainment of a higher state of consciousness, a vantage point from which one can see the interconnectedness of all things and understand their place within the whole. The mountain, therefore, serves as an external mirror for the internal quest. By engaging with its physical reality, the seeker is given a template and a guide for their own inner transformation, a silent, stone teacher offering lessons in perseverance, humility, and the ultimate refinement of the self into its most enlightened and golden form. But what if the mountain wasn't just a silent teacher, but a conscious one, a living, breathing entity with a personality, a will, and a desire to communicate? This profound shift in perspective brings us to one of the most intimate and widespread ways humans have related to these great peaks, by envisioning them as deities. Across the globe, cultures didn't just believe mountains held wisdom. They believed the mountain itself was a wise, ancient being, a god or spirit who could choose to share its secrets with those who approached with the right heart. This act of personification transformed the mountain from a passive library into an active librarian, a conscious keeper of knowledge who could guide, test, and ultimately enlighten the seeker. In the spiritual tradition of Japanese Shinto, this concept is beautifully embodied by the kami. These are not distant, omnipotent gods in the Western sense, but sacred, immanent spirits that inhabit the natural world, and the most powerful among them reside in mountains. Mount Fuji, with its perfect, symmetrical cone, is not merely a volcano. It is the sacred home of the Kami Konohana Sakuya Haim, the goddess of blooming trees and volcanoes. She isn't a detached ruler looking down from on high. Her spirit is the mountain. Her wisdom is communicated not through thunderous proclamations, but through subtle, natural signs. A pilgrim might seek her guidance through prayer and then receive an answer in the form of a vivid dream, an unexpected encounter with a specific animal on the path, or a shift in the weather that reveals a previously hidden route. The knowledge she offers is deeply practical and ecological: when to plant, where to find pure water, how to live in harmony with the volatile earth beneath one's feet. To learn from Fuji is to learn to read the intentions of the kami within it, to understand the mountain as a living, conscious partner in the quest for understanding. This idea of a mountain deity dispensing foundational laws is powerfully echoed in the myths of ancient Greece. Mount Olympus was far more than a picturesque home for the gods. It was the seat of ultimate authority and cosmic order, and its primary resident, Zeus, was the source of divine law. Unlike the eminent kami of Japan, Zeus ruled from his throne atop the peak, separate from the mountain yet intrinsically linked to it. The laws he provided to humanity, often through intermediaries or oracles, were not suggestions but the fundamental codes that structured civilization itself. The mountain's immense height and the terrifying storms that wreathed its summit were a direct reflection of Zeus's power, or inspiring, unpredictable, and ultimately sovereign. To receive wisdom from Olympus was not a gentle process of interpretation, but an act of receiving revelation from a supreme, patriarchal authority. The mountain became the unassailable fortress protecting this ultimate source of order, and accessing its knowledge required appeasing the powerful, and sometimes temperamental, being who dwelled there. What unites these vastly different traditions, the eminent kami and the ruling sky god, is the fascinating way the mountain deity's wisdom was believed to be encoded directly into the local ecology. The god didn't just hold knowledge, the knowledge was an expression of the god's own being, woven into the very fabric of the mountain's life. The weather patterns that changed with the seasons were not random meteorological events but the breathing of the mountain spirit, teaching lessons about cycles, patience, and renewal. The behavior of animals, a bear emerging from hibernation, an eagle circling a thermal updraft, were seen as deliberate messages or omens from the deity, offering insights on leadership, survival, and perspective. Most importantly, the medicinal plants that grew on the sacred slopes were understood as direct gifts from the god, each herb and root containing a specific healing property that the deity revealed to shamans, healers, and wise women through vision quests or ritual practices. This made the entire mountain ecosystem a living, breathing text that could only be read through a relationship of reverence and reciprocity. Interacting with the deity was not about demanding answers but about entering into a respectful dialogue. This is why pilgrimage rituals are so central to these traditions. The arduous climb to a shrine on Mount Fuji or the sacrificial ceremonies held on the lower slopes of Olympus were not meant to conquer the mountain but to honor it. Each step taken, each offering made, was a way of saying, "I am here to listen, I am ready to learn." The physical hardship of the journey was a form of devotion, a way to purify the seeker and make them worthy of receiving the mountain's secrets. The deity, in turn, might respond by making a path clear, by granting a moment of stunning clarity as the clouds part from the summit, or by imparting a sudden intuitive understanding of a problem that seemed unsolvable down in the lowlands. This anthropomorphic encoding, giving the library a face, a name, and a voice, made the vast, impersonal wisdom of nature feel personal, accessible, and immediate. It transformed the quest for knowledge from an intellectual exercise into a sacred relationship, reminding us that the greatest truths are not found in isolation, but are offered through a bond of mutual respect between humanity and the conscious, intelligent world we inhabit. Yet this profound repository of wisdom extends far beyond the spiritual and astronomical into the very immediate and practical art of survival. The mountain, in its vast complexity, functions as one of the most comprehensive ecological textbooks ever written, its lessons inscribed not in stone carvings but in the living language of its biodiversity, its water cycles, and its ever-shifting weather. For the indigenous cultures who have lived in the shadow of these peaks for millennia, learning to read this natural text was not a philosophical exercise, it was a matter of life and death. This intimate, observational science transformed the mountain into a dynamic, interactive library of ecological knowledge, where every plant, animal, and cloud formation held a specific, vital piece of information. Consider the intricate water systems of a great mountain range. The snowpack at the highest elevations isn't just a scenic feature. It is a massive, natural reservoir, and its meltwater is the primary source for rivers that sustain life across entire regions. Indigenous cultures developed incredibly precise methods for reading this aquatic library. The Quechua people of the Andes, for instance, could predict seasonal water availability, and thus the success of their crops by observing the consistency of the winter snow on their sacred apus, or mountain spirits. A heavy, wet snowpack indicated a slow, sustained melt, promising a long-growing season. A light, dry snow suggested a rapid melt and potential drought. They didn't need advanced hydrology. They had generations of careful observation encoded into oral tradition, allowing them to read the mountain's frozen pages and plan their agricultural year accordingly. Similarly, the location of a spring emerging from a mountainside wasn't random. It was a clear indicator of underground aquifers and geological layers, a piece of data that could mean the difference between finding water or perishing on a long journey. This deep literacy extended to the mountain's rich tapestry of life. An alpine meadow is not merely a beautiful collection of wildflowers. It is a meticulously organized pharmacy and a grocery store. The Sherpa guides of the Himalayas possess an encyclopedic knowledge of high-altitude botany, identifying specific plants that can treat altitude sickness, stanch bleeding, or provide a burst of energy in a punishing climate. A particular moss might be used to insulate a boot, while a certain lichen could be a signal of air purity. This knowledge was so precise and valuable that it was often protected through complex systems of taboos and stories. A sacred slope might be declared off-limits for hunting not because of an arbitrary spiritual rule, but because that area served as a critical breeding ground for a key species. A story about a mountain spirit punishing someone who over-harvested a particular herb was a powerful cultural mechanism for ensuring sustainable foraging practices, protecting that species from extinction and guaranteeing its availability for future generations. The myth was the delivery system for the ecological law. Perhaps the most sophisticated reading of the mountain's text came in the form of weather prediction. Before satellite imagery, those who lived near mountains became expert meteorologists by learning the language of the clouds and winds that played across the peaks. The Maori of Aotearoa, New Zealand, developed an intricate forecasting system based on the behavior of the mist and cloud formations that clung to their sacred mountains, or monga. The specific way clouds streamed from a particular peak could predict an incoming storm with remarkable accuracy, allowing communities to secure their vessels or prepare their homes. In the Alps, farmers knew that a cap of cloud, a lenticularis, forming over the Matterhorn was a sure sign of changing weather, often heralding strong winds. This ability to interpret the mountain's atmospheric signals was a form of encoded knowledge that directly ensured the safety and prosperity of the community. The mountain was a giant natural weather station, its face constantly broadcasting information to those who had learned its language. This profound, practical wisdom, passed down through generations, reveals the most holistic aspect of the mountain library. It didn't just hold spiritual truths or celestial data. It contained the essential instructions for living in a sustainable, interconnected, and respectful relationship with the natural world. This careful guarding of profound wisdom leads us to a crucial and fascinating dimension of the mountain library, the concept that its most valuable texts were never meant to be open to the public. The deepest knowledge wasn't simply lying around for anyone to stumble upon. It was protected by a sophisticated system of secrecy and initiation. The mountain itself, in its formidable and unforgiving nature, was the ultimate gatekeeper, designing a curriculum of challenges that every sincere seeker was required to pass before being granted entry to its inner sanctum of understanding. This wasn't about elitism, but about preservation and potency. The most transformative truths were considered too powerful, too easily misunderstood or misused to be handed out casually. They had to be earned, ensuring the recipient possessed the maturity, humility, and right intention to wield such knowledge responsibly. We see this principle enacted with profound gravity in ancient Greek traditions like the Eleusinian mysteries. While not held on a literal mountain peak, the rituals were deeply connected to the goddess Demeter and the cyclical secrets of life, death, and rebirth that mountains so powerfully symbolize. The initiates underwent a long and arduous process of purification, fasting, and isolation. They were then led through a series of sacred dramas and revelations inside the telesterion, where the innermost secrets or aporata were finally unveiled. The power of this experience was legendary. It was said that those who witnessed it were freed from the fear of death. The entire process was shrouded in such strict secrecy that to this day we do not know exactly what was revealed. This underscores a vital point. The value and transformative impact of the wisdom were intrinsically linked to the preparatory journey and the vow of silence that followed. The revelation was not just information, it was a state of being achieved only through rigorous preparation. Now, translate that concept onto the physical reality of a mountain. The journey to a remote, high-altitude sanctuary was the initiation rite. The mountain, with its sheer cliffs, treacherous weather, thin air, and isolating silence, became the active administrator of the test. Every step of the ascent was a question posed to the seeker's resolve. The physical ordeal of the climb forced a confrontation with one's own limitations and fears, stripping away the ego and the distractions of everyday life. The solitude provided a blank canvas for deep introspection, and the very real danger served as the ultimate filter, separating the casually curious from the truly committed. A pilgrim setting out to circumambulate Mount Kailash isn't just taking a long walk. They are embarking on a multi-day trial that challenges the body, focuses the mind, and opens the heart, all under the watchful gaze of the sacred peak. The mountain doesn't make it easy because easy lessons are rarely valued or integrated. This pedagogical role of the landscape is beautifully illustrated in the vision quest traditions of many Native American tribes. A young person seeking purpose or a community elder seeking guidance would journey alone into the high places, often to a specific, sacred mountain known to be a place of power. There, without food or shelter, they would fast, pray, and wait for a vision. The mountain, in its imposing silence, became the teacher and the initiator. The hunger, the exposure to the elements, and the profound loneliness were not punishments. They were the necessary tools to break down the seeker's ordinary consciousness, making them receptive to a deeper, more symbolic language. The vision that eventually came perhaps through an animal encounter, a weather event, or a dream was not a straightforward answer. It was a coded message, a personal myth that the individual would then spend years with the help of elders learning to interpret and live by. The mountain gave the lesson, but the community helped with the translation, ensuring the wisdom was correctly understood and applied. This system of initiation ensured that sacred knowledge remained a living, dynamic force rather than a stagnant set of dogmas. It created a direct lineage of wisdom, passed not through books but from a qualified teacher to a prepared student within the context of the sacred space itself. The mountain was the constant, immutable reference point in this transmission. the silent witness to countless generations of seekers who came to its slopes to be tested and transformed. It reminds us that the most valuable libraries often have strict access policies for a reason. The deepest truths about existence and our place within it are not commodities to be consumed, but profound realizations to be earned through direct, often difficult, experience. The mountain, in its majestic and demanding presence, ensures that this timeless pedagogical process continues, offering its wisdom only to those who demonstrate they are ready to listen. But what happens when we bring the tools of modern science to these ancient peaks? Do the legends hold up under the scrutiny of satellite imagery and carbon dating? Remarkably, the answer is increasingly yes. We are living in a time where cutting-edge technology is not debunking ancient mountain lore, but often validating it, revealing a sophisticated layer of observation and intention that was previously invisible to us. This convergence of myth and measurement invites a thrilling reassessment of our ancestors, not as primitive storytellers, but as keen natural philosophers who encoded their profound understanding of the world into the very landscapes they revered. Consider the transformative impact of LiDAR technology. This system uses laser pulses from aircraft to map the ground surface, effectively digitally stripping away the dense forest canopy that has hidden the Earth's secrets for centuries. When archaeologists turned these powerful sensors on mountain slopes in places like Mesoamerica, they made stunning discoveries. In the Mosquitia region of Honduras, scans revealed what appeared to be the ruins of a lost city, often referred to as the City of the Monkey God, or the legendary White City, built on a mountainside and long spoken of in local tradition. These weren't just a few scattered stones. The LiDAR maps showed extensive terraces, plazas, and irrigation canals carved into the difficult terrain, suggesting a significant and intentional human effort to modify a sacred peak for habitation and ceremony. This technological revelation gives dramatic weight to the oral histories that spoke of advanced culture living in those exact highlands, a story that was once dismissed as mere folklore. This validation extends beyond grand structures to the very practical knowledge embedded in mountain ecosystems. For generations, ethnobotanists listened to the recipes of indigenous shamans who used specific plants found only on high-altitude slopes for healing. Western science often dismissed these practices as superstition, but now laboratory analysis frequently confirms the efficacy of these traditional remedies. A plant used by Quechua healers in the Andes for centuries to treat altitude sickness is now known to contain compounds that help the body utilize oxygen more efficiently. A moss employed by Himalayan Sherpas to dress wounds has proven to have powerful antibacterial properties. What was once considered mountain magic is now understood as a sophisticated empirical pharmacology developed through millennia of careful observation and trial and error. The mountain was indeed a library of medicine, and its indigenous librarians had a filing system far more complex than we ever imagined. Perhaps the most profound convergences are found in archaeoastronomy, the study of how ancient cultures understood the skies. The stories of certain peaks marking solstices or acting as celestial calendars were often recorded by early anthropologists as charming myths. But then, researchers with theodolites and GPS units arrived to take precise measurements. At sites like the already mentioned Medicine Wheel in Wyoming, or at numerous sacred peaks in the Andes, they found that the alignments were not approximate, they were astonishingly precise. A specific notch between two rocks on a distant ridge does, in fact, frame the rising sun on the summer solstice with an accuracy that could only be achieved through generations of meticulous observation. This scientific confirmation transforms a legendary tale into a data point, revealing that our ancestors were not just worshipping the sun, they were tracking it with the precision of astronomers, using the immutable features of their mountain library as a permanent observatory. This interdisciplinary dialogue between intuition and empiricism is reshaping our understanding of history itself. It suggests that the distinction we often make between myth and science is a modern invention. For ancient cultures, these were two sides of the same coin, a holistic way of knowing that wove together spiritual reverence with razor-sharp observation of the natural world. The mountain stands at the center of this reconciliation, a subject of both sacred legend and rigorous study. It becomes the ultimate bridge, inviting us to listen to the old stories with new ears and to look at the scientific data with a sense of wonder. We are beginning to see that the stories our ancestors told were not merely explanations for things they didn't understand, but were often the vehicles they used to transmit a deep, hard-won, and practical wisdom about their world, encoded in the most durable medium they had, the living, breathing, eternal library of the sacred peaks. This remarkable method of weaving memory directly into the landscape finds a powerful parallel in a cognitive technique many of us have encountered, the memory palace. You might have heard of this concept, used by champion memorizers and ancient Greek orators alike, where you visualize a familiar building, like your childhood home, and then you place vivid images representing what you need to remember in specific locations within it. To recall the information, you simply take a mental walk through your palace, retrieving the images from each room. Now, expand that idea from a single house to an entire mountain range. For oral cultures without written records, a sacred peak wasn't just a spiritual symbol. It was the ultimate memory palace, a colossal, natural architecture for storing an entire civilization's knowledge. Its sheer scale and the distinctiveness of its features, a jagged cliff that looks like an eagle's beak, a strangely bent tree, a spring that bubbles up from a specific cluster of rocks, provided an endless number of perfect loci or locations to anchor information. This wasn't an abstract concept, it was a highly practical and sophisticated information technology. A shaman or a knowledge keeper wouldn't just see a waterfall, they would see the place where the story of the Great Flood was stored. A peculiar, lightning-blasted tree halfway up the slope wasn't just a tree, it was the marker for a complex set of laws governing kinship and marriage. The summit, which on a clear night touched the Milky Way, was the locus for advanced astronomical knowledge, perhaps encoding the timing of a rare celestial event that only occurred once a generation. To navigate the mountain physically was to navigate the culture's entire intellectual and spiritual heritage mentally. Each feature triggered a specific part of a song, a story, a law, or a navigational instruction. The landscape itself became a vast, three-dimensional filing system, and the act of walking through it was the process of accessing the files. We see this technique perfected in the Aboriginal Australian songlines, as mentioned before, but the concept was global. The ancient Greeks, who famously developed the method of loci for oration, lived in a landscape dominated by Mount Olympus and Mount Parnassus. It's no stretch to imagine that the original memory palaces for early Greek bards were these very mountains, their features holding the vast epics of Homer long before they were ever written down. In the Andes, a skilled Inca quipucamayok, a keeper of the knotted string records known as quipus, might have used the visible, terraced slopes of a sacred apu as a visual guide to organize complex numerical data about crop yields and tributes. The mountain provided the structure, and the human mind provided the vivid imagery to make the data unforgettable. The genius of this system was its incredible durability and efficiency. A book can burn, a digital file can corrupt, but a mountain, barring a catastrophic geological event, is permanent. The library's shelves and chapters remain fixed for centuries. Furthermore, this method leveraged the brain's innate strength for spatial and visual memory, which is far more powerful than our capacity for rote memorization. It's one thing to try and remember a list of 50 medicinal plants and their uses. It's entirely another to remember a walk along a trail where the first plant is found near the twisted oak, the next by the red rock, and a third where the stream bends. The information becomes embedded in a rich context, making it easier to recall and far more difficult to lose. The mountain, in its eternal presence, guaranteed that the architecture of this vast mental library would never change, allowing generation after generation to walk the same paths and access the same timeless knowledge, simply by looking up at the silent, steadfast teacher that had always been there. This powerful idea of mountains as vast reservoirs of hidden knowledge did not remain confined to myth and ritual. It flowed directly into the very heart of human creativity, shaping some of our most enduring works of literature and art. For centuries, storytellers, poets, and painters have returned to the mountain again and again, using its imposing form as the ultimate symbol for the quest for wisdom, the trials of the spirit, and the revelation of profound truth. In these artistic realms, the mountain is never just a backdrop. It is an active, dynamic character, a silent teacher whose very slopes encode the lessons the hero must learn. We can see this perhaps most clearly in Dante Alighieri's 14th century epic, The Divine Comedy. In the second book, Purgatorio, the poet describes the mountain of Purgatory, a towering, seven-terraced peak that rises from the ocean in the southern hemisphere, the only land in an otherwise empty sea. This is no ordinary mountain. Its very structure is a perfect allegory. Each of its 7 terraces corresponds to one of the 7 deadly sins, and the penitent souls who journey upward must spend time on each level, purging themselves of that specific failing before they can ascend to the next. The mountain itself, with its arduous and precise path, is the mechanism of purification and education. It is a library of moral and spiritual knowledge, where the landscape literally encodes the path to salvation. Dante doesn't just climb it, he reads it, learning the nature of sin and virtue through the direct experience of the ascent, guided by the mountain's unyielding geometry. Centuries later, and in a very different genre, J.R.R. Tolkien would weave this same ancient intuition into the very fabric of his fictional world of Middle-earth. The misty mountains are not a passive barrier on the map. They are a sentient presence, an ancient, brooding range that guards secrets and challenges all who attempt to cross them. Within their roots lies the lost dwarven kingdom of Moria, a vast subterranean library of stone that holds the history, craftsmanship, and ultimately the folly of an entire civilization. The mountains themselves are depicted as wise and old with their own will. When the Fellowship attempts to cross them, the mountain actively resists, forcing them into the depths where they will face their greatest fears and uncover crucial knowledge. For Tolkien, the mountain was the ideal vessel for what he called deep time, the sense of a history so vast and layered that it could only be contained within the bones of the earth, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. This symbolic encoding extends beyond Western literature into the profound visual traditions of East Asia. For over 1,000 years, Chinese Shanshui painters have sought to capture not the literal likeness of a mountain, but its essential spirit or kai. In these breathtaking ink-wash paintings, the towering, mist-shrouded peaks are never mere scenery. They are the central embodiment of Taoist and Zen Buddhist principles. The way a peak pushes into the clouds represents the aspiration of the human spirit toward the divine. The deep, hidden valleys and grottos suggest the mysteries of the unknown and the inner self. The waterfalls cascading down sheer rock faces are the flowing, dynamic energy of the Tao itself. the entire composition is a carefully balanced equation of yin and yang, the solid, enduring yang of the mountain peak harmonizing with the soft, flowing yin of the clouds and water. To contemplate a classic Shan Shui painting is to engage in a form of visual meditation, to read the mountain and receive its silent teaching about balance, permanence, and the interconnectedness of all things. The artist acts as a scribe, encoding these philosophical truths into the brushstrokes that form the crag and the cliff. This artistic legacy continues to thrive in our modern era, proving the timeless potency of the mountain as a symbol. The sweeping, dramatic landscapes of fantasy films and video games almost invariably feature a sacred or treacherous mountain that holds the key to the story's central quest. Whether it's the fictional Mount Doom in The Lord of the Rings or the very real, mythologically charged Mount Everest in countless documentaries, the peak remains the ultimate destination for revelation and transformation. Even in abstract art, the triangular form of the mountain persists as a symbol of stability, aspiration, and enlightenment. This enduring presence across media and millennia shows that the concept of the mountain library is not a forgotten superstition, but a deep, archetypal truth that continues to resonate within the human psyche. Artists instinctively understand what ancient cultures knew, that if you seek to represent the quest for the highest knowledge, you must inevitably turn your gaze toward the highest peaks. What's truly staggering is that this idea of the mountain as a protective vault for essential knowledge emerges independently, in cultures separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, who had absolutely no contact with one another. It's as if the human psyche, when faced with the threat of annihilation, universally turns its gaze upward toward the highest, most permanent features of the landscape and instinctively understands this is where we must preserve what matters most. This pattern forms one of the most compelling chapters in the story of our species, a shared intuition written into our collective mythology. Consider the global prevalence of the Great Flood myth. While the story itself is found on every inhabited continent, the role of the mountain within it is remarkably consistent. It is never just a place of refuge from rising waters. It is the sacred ark that carries the seeds of civilization itself into a new world. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah's Ark comes to rest on the peaks of Mount Ararat, and from that high point, the knowledge of God's covenant and the promise of renewal are carried down to repopulate the earth. In Hindu tradition, it is the sage Manu who is warned of the coming deluge. He builds a boat that is tied by the great serpent Vasuki to the horn of the divine fish Matsya, and he is towed to safety on the summit of Mount Himavan, the Lord of Mountains, where he preserves the Vedas, the foundational spiritual knowledge of humanity. This theme repeats itself across the Pacific. For the native Hawaiian people, the Sky Father Wakea and the Earth Mother Papa give birth to the islands, with the immense mountain of Mauna Kea as their firstborn and most sacred child. In the Cumulipo, the Hawaiian creation chant, the island is born from the depths and grows upward, and it is upon the slopes of Mauna Kea that life is believed to have first taken root after a great flood receded. The mountain is the pico, the navel, the center of the world and the source of life and knowledge. Similarly, in the Andes, the Incan flood myth tells of a great Yunu Pachacuti, a world-reversing flood, from which only 2 shepherds survived by fleeing to the top of a towering peak called Vilcacotto. There, they repopulated the world, carrying with them the traditions and laws of their ancestors. This pattern is so widespread that it transcends coincidence. From the Sumerian Ziusudra, whose boat grounded on a mountain, to the Gun-Yu flood myths of China where survivors escaped to high places, the narrative is eerily similar. Why would cultures with no possible way to communicate this story all arrive at the same conclusion, that the mountain is the natural sanctuary in a cataclysm. One compelling explanation lies in simple geography. In the event of a massive flood, either real or metaphorical, the highest ground is the obvious, logical place of safety. But the myths go far beyond mere survival. They are about the preservation of knowledge. The survivors on the mountain aren't just saving their own lives. They are saving the laws, the stories, the language, the rituals, and the spiritual understanding of their people. The mountain becomes the lifeboat for an entire culture's intellectual and spiritual heritage. This points to a profound, archetypal understanding of the mountain as a natural ark. Its immovable mass, its defiance of the chaos below, its proximity to the heavens, all these qualities make it the perfect symbol for stability and permanence in a world of flux and disaster. It is the one thing that cannot be washed away. By encoding this understanding into their most sacred stories, our ancestors were performing a crucial act of cultural insurance. They were embedding a survival manual into the very bedrock of their mythology, teaching each new generation that when everything else is lost, the high places hold the key to starting again. They are the immutable hard drives of the planet, safeguarding the operating system of civilization against any crash. This collective, cross-cultural wisdom reveals a deep-seated human belief that the greatest truths are not meant to be kept in vulnerable lowlands, but must be entrusted to the steadfast guardianship of the sacred peaks, ensuring that no matter what is forgotten below, something essential will always remain, waiting on the summit for us to remember. Now let's shift our focus inward to the very mind of the seeker standing on that sacred slope. What is it about these immense, ancient formations that doesn't just capture our gaze, but fundamentally alters our state of being? Modern neuroscience is beginning to catch up with what mystics and poets have known for millennia. That awe is not just a feeling, it's a catalyst for a profound shift in consciousness. When we stand before a majestic mountain range, something remarkable happens in our brains. Studies using functional MRI scanners have shown that experiencing awe, like the kind triggered by a breathtaking natural vista, can quiet the default mode network, that part of our brain responsible for our internal monologue, our sense of self, our worries, and our to-do list. This quieting creates a state of heightened awareness where we feel less focused on ourselves and more connected to something vast and transcendent. It's in this expanded mental space, free from the constant chatter of the ego, that creativity flourishes and novel connections are made. This isn't just poetic speculation. It's a measurable neurological event that provides a stunning scientific parallel to the ancient idea of the mountain as a place of revelation. The peak doesn't just hold wisdom, it actively creates the optimal psychological conditions for us to receive it. This mental shift is powerfully amplified by the very physicality of the high-altitude environment. The solitude found on a mountainside is qualitatively different from the quiet of a room. It's an immersive, all-encompassing silence broken only by the wind and one's own heartbeat, a sensory deprivation that forces the mind inward. Combine this with the physiological effects of altitude, the slight lightheadedness, the increased heart rate, the sharper, thinner air, and you have a recipe for an altered state. Throughout history, cultures have used rhythmic drumming, fasting, or breathwork to achieve similar states for vision quests and meditation. The mountain, in its natural state, provides this same service. It facilitates a deep, uninterrupted introspection that is increasingly rare in our modern, stimulus-saturated world. This makes the summit not just a geographical point, but a psychological vantage point, a place where we can gain critical distance from our everyday concerns and see our lives and our place in the cosmos with startling clarity. The mountain, in effect, becomes a silent therapist, its presence encouraging a mental unpacking and reorganization that is essential for genuine insight. This leads us to a fascinating inversion of the library metaphor. We've explored how mountains store knowledge, but this psychological perspective suggests they are also active generators of it. The mind-terrain interaction is a dynamic, two-way street. The mountain provides the awe-inspiring stimulus and the conducive environment, and the human mind, in response, enters a state ripe for innovation and understanding. It's in this state that a scientist might have a sudden breakthrough, an artist might conceive a new masterpiece, or a pilgrim might arrive at a life-altering personal realization. The insight feels received as if downloaded from the mountain itself, but it is born from the unique alchemy between the external landscape and our internal cognitive processes. The knowledge wasn't necessarily encoded in the rock waiting to be found. Rather, the mountain acted as the perfect midwife for its birth within the human consciousness. This explains why so many pivotal moments of understanding Moses and the commandments, the Buddha's enlightenment, the revelations of countless sages, are traditionally set on mountaintops. The setting is not arbitrary decoration. It is an integral, active component of the revelation itself. This blend of ancient intuition and cutting-edge science offers a powerful, holistic explanation for why mountains have always felt so inherently wise. That feeling of wisdom we perceive isn't just a projection or a metaphor. It's a recognition of a real, measurable effect these environments have on us. They possess what we might call a psychological affordance. Their very structure and presence invite and support specific, valuable states of mind. Their permanence stands in stark contrast to our fleeting lives, offering a perspective that can dissolve anxiety. Their immense scale reminds us of our smallness in a way that is not humiliating but liberating, freeing us from the weight of our own self-importance. Their complex, ancient beauty engages our senses fully, pulling us into the present moment. When we say a mountain feels wise, we are acknowledging its role as a master facilitator of psychological states that are essential for deep learning, creativity, and existential peace. The library is not just in the mountain. The library is the mountain, and the act of visiting it, of opening ourselves to its influence, is how we check out its most transformative texts that are written not in stone, but in the expanded awareness of our own mind. This profound interaction with the mountain as a living library finds its most dynamic expression not in quiet study, but in the arduous, transformative act of pilgrimage. A journey to a peak like Kailash, Fuji, or Sinai is never a simple hike. It is a carefully designed ritual, a physical and spiritual technology for decoding the mountain's layered wisdom. The pilgrim understands that the secrets of the peak are not offered to a passive observer. They must be earned through a process of purification, effort, and deep engagement, turning the entire body into an instrument for reading the sacred text of the landscape. This is where the metaphor of the library becomes a lived, visceral experience, where every aching muscle and labored breath becomes part of the interpretative process. Consider the ancient practice of circumambulation, or Kora, as performed around Mount Kailash. The pilgrim doesn't aim for the summit. Instead, they walk a sacred path around its base, a ritual that can take days in the thin, punishing air of the Tibetan plateau. This isn't a mere tradition, it's a profound act of symbolic reading. With each step on the 32-mile path, the pilgrim encounters a new facet of the mountain's personality, a towering cliff face that tells a story of divine power, a serene glacial lake that reflects a lesson in stillness, a field of many stones left by previous seekers that speaks of community and shared devotion. The circuit itself mirrors the cyclical nature of time, karma, and the seasons, teaching the walker about the eternal return and the interconnectedness of all things. The mountain remains stationary, but the pilgrim's changing perspective reveals its hidden dimensions, literally walking through its chapters and verses, absorbing their meaning not intellectually, but through the rhythm of their own footsteps. This physical ordeal is almost always paired with practices designed to quiet the mind and sharpen the senses, making the seeker a more receptive vessel for revelation. Fasting, prayer, and periods of intentional silence are not punishments. They are tools for clearing away the mental static of everyday life. On the slopes of Mount Sinai, where Moses is said to have received the Torah, modern pilgrims often ascend at night, fasting and praying, to reach the summit for the dawn. The hunger pangs and the fatigue from the climb serve to break down the ego's usual defenses. In this stripped-down, vulnerable state, the beauty of the sunrise breaking over the desert horizon is no longer just a visual spectacle. It becomes a direct, heart-stopping communication, a moment of pure awe that can feel like a divine download. The lack of ordinary sensory input like food or chatter heightens the remaining senses, allowing the pilgrim to hear the subtle language of the wind and truly see the intricate geometry of the stone. The mountain's wisdom is transmitted not through words, but through a profound experiential shift that occurs when the body and mind have been prepared to receive it. Ultimately, the pilgrimage itself becomes the teacher. The knowledge gained isn't a list of facts to be memorized, but a transformation in how the pilgrim perceives the world and their place within it. The mountain, in its silent majesty, provides the context for this alchemy, but the real work is done within the heart and mind of the one who makes the journey. They return from the peak not with a scroll of secret information, but with a renewed sense of perspective, a deepened resilience, and an intuitive understanding of truths that are difficult to articulate in ordinary language. The mountain library requires this active, participatory engagement because the most valuable wisdom cannot be simply given. It must be discovered through direct encounter, earned through sincere effort, and integrated through the transformative power of the journey itself. This profound connection between the mountain and its wisdom inevitably leads us to a crucial question, not just what was known, but how that knowledge was meant to be used. The ancient libraries of the sacred peaks were never intended to be storehouses of neutral information. They were designed as repositories of ethical understanding, where the very act of learning was intertwined with a responsibility to act with virtue. Woven directly into the myths, taboos, and rituals surrounding these places are powerful moral codes that served a dual purpose: to protect the fragile mountain ecosystems and to protect humanity from the consequences of its own arrogance. The mountain, in its majestic permanence and delicate balance, became the ultimate moral instructor, teaching through its mere existence that true wisdom must always be paired with humility and a deep, active reverence for all life. We see this principle enacted with beautiful clarity in the Himalayan tradition of ahimsa, or non-harm, which extends far beyond a simple rule against violence. On the sacred slopes of peaks like Kailash or in the valleys of the Himalayas, this concept becomes a comprehensive ecological and spiritual ethic. The belief that the entire mountain is the abode of deities and enlightened beings means that every action taken there has karmic significance. This leads to specific, culturally enforced taboos. Hunting is strictly forbidden, as all animals are seen as manifestations of protective spirits or even as the mounts of God. Cutting down certain trees or disturbing the soil unnecessarily is prohibited, understood as a violation of the mountain's physical body. Even the act of speaking loudly or arguing is discouraged, as it disturbs the profound peace and meditation of the countless invisible beings believed to reside there. These aren't arbitrary restrictions. They are a sophisticated system of environmental ethics encoded into spiritual practice, ensuring that the seekers who came to the mountain for knowledge would leave its ecosystem perfectly intact for the seekers who would follow. This idea of the mountain as a guardian of ethical boundaries is a global phenomenon. Among the Oromo people of Ethiopia, the sacred mountain of Waka is a place where societal laws are believed to have been divinely revealed. Pilgrimages to its summit are not just for personal enlightenment, but for seeking guidance on community disputes and ethical dilemmas, reinforcing the idea that the highest wisdom is that which fosters justice and social harmony. Similarly, for the Maori of Aotearoa, New Zealand, each sacred mountain or monga is an ancestor. This relationship is not one of ownership but of kinship and custodianship. The knowledge of the mountain, where to find food, how to predict weather, which plants heal, comes with the profound responsibility to protect the ancestor in return. This reciprocal duty is encapsulated in the concept of Kaishiakatanga, or guardianship, which binds the people to the land in a covenant of care. To misuse the mountain's resources or to show it disrespect is not just an ecological error, it is a deep failure in one's duty to the family. The mountain's very physicality reinforces these lessons in humility. Its sheer scale reminds us of our smallness in the grand scheme of the cosmos, directly countering the human tendency toward hubris. Its unpredictable weather and potential for sudden danger teach respect for forces far beyond our control, and its incredible fragility, evident in the delicate alpine flowers that can be destroyed by a single misstep, or the pristine streams easily polluted, demonstrates that what is most powerful is often also most vulnerable. This combination of majesty and fragility is a masterful pedagogical tool. It teaches that reverence is not born from fear alone, but from a recognition of profound beauty and interconnectivity. By placing the most valued knowledge in such an environment, our ancestors were making a profound statement. You cannot separate the information from the context in which it is found. To access the library, you must first agree to its terms of conduct, to tread lightly, to take only what you need, and to recognize that you are a guest in a sacred space. This holistic integration of knowledge and virtue transforms the mountain from a passive archive into an active moral compass. The wisdom it offers is not just informational, it is deeply transformational, intended to change how we behave in the world. It suggests that the ultimate purpose of knowing the secrets of the stars, the properties of plants, or the cycles of time is not to gain power over nature, but to learn how to live in harmonious relationship with it. The mountain library, therefore, safeguards its most precious asset not with locks and keys, but with ethical prerequisites. The greatest secrets are not hidden from the unworthy to be elitist, but to ensure that those who discover them have already undergone the inner transformation necessary to wield such understanding with compassion and responsibility. In this way, the sacred peaks stand as eternal reminders that the journey to wisdom and the journey to becoming a better person are, and must always be, one and the same path. Yet, even as we uncover these profound connections between mountains and human consciousness, a shadow falls across these sacred libraries, the very stability that made peaks such perfect repositories of knowledge. Their ancient, unchanging nature is now under threat from a force of our own making. Climate change is not merely altering the weather, it is actively erasing the very texts of this global archive, melting the ice that holds historical records, shifting the ecosystems that taught generations how to live in balance, and silencing the indigenous voices who have been their primary librarians for millennia. The slow, tragic disappearance of glaciers is one of the most visually stark examples of this loss. These rivers of ice are not just frozen water, they are historical documents. Scientists drill deep into them to extract ice cores, which contain trapped air bubbles and particles that provide a precise record of Earth's atmosphere going back hundreds of thousands of years. But as these glaciers retreat and vanish, entire chapters of our planet's climatic history are literally melting away and flowing into the sea, lost forever before we ever had a chance to read them. This is a physical, data-driven loss, but the cultural erosion is even more profound. For communities in the Andes, the gradual disappearance of a specific glacier might mean the loss of a critical water source, but it also means the fading of a story. That glacier's unique shape, its pattern of retreat and advance, its very name in a native language like Quechua or Aymara, all of this is data woven into the cultural fabric, dictating agricultural rituals, informing creation myths, and serving as a spiritual landmark. When the glacier is gone, the story it anchored loses its reference point, becoming abstract and eventually forgotten. The intricate ecological knowledge is vanishing just as quickly. Indigenous healers, or curanderos, in mountain regions possess an encyclopedic understanding of alpine flora, knowing which plant at a specific altitude can treat a fever, which moss can soothe a burn, and which root must be harvested only under a full moon to retain its potency. This wisdom is not written down, it is orally transmitted through generations within the context of the living landscape. But as warming temperatures force plant species to migrate higher in search of cooler climates, they eventually run out of mountain. Species that have grown on a sacred slope for millennia are dying out, and with them, the knowledge of their uses disappears because the living library that held that knowledge is itself being rewritten and dismantled. Perhaps the most heartbreaking loss is that of language itself. Mountain regions are often bastions of linguistic diversity, home to ancient languages that contain unique concepts and ways of understanding the world that are found nowhere else. The Toda people of the Nilgiri Hills in India, for instance, have a complex vocabulary and set of traditions deeply tied to their montane environment. As younger generations migrate to cities and global culture homogenizes remote areas, these languages are falling silent. When the last fluent speaker of a mountain dialect passes away, it is not just a language that dies, it is an entire way of seeing, a unique key for decoding a specific mountain's library that is lost forever. This dual crisis, the loss of both the natural system and the cultural knowledge it fostered, has sparked an urgent, global effort to document and preserve what remains. Ethnobotanists are now racing to work with elder shamans, recording their plant knowledge before it is lost. Linguists are creating digital archives of endangered mountain languages. And technologists are using high-resolution mapping and 3D modeling to create virtual records of sacred sites, from Tibetan monasteries to Andean ceremonial centers. This modern act of preservation is in its own way a new form of encoding. We are creating digital backups of a physical and cultural heritage that is under dire threat. Yet this technological solution also presents a poignant irony. We are using the most ephemeral of mediums, digital data stored on servers, to try and save the most permanent of wisdom, which was originally stored in stone and story. It underscores our responsibility to not just document, but to act. Preserving the mountain's wisdom ultimately means preserving the mountain itself, by addressing the root causes of climate change and supporting the indigenous communities who have been their steadfast guardians. The silent call from the peaks is no longer just an invitation to seek wisdom, but a desperate plea for us to become protectors, to ensure that these immense, ancient libraries have a future from which others can continue to learn. But this new era of technological exploration brings with it a profound and necessary question. one that sits at the intersection of silicon and spirit. As we use these powerful digital tools to map, scan, and analyze sacred peaks, are we truly decoding their wisdom, or are we in danger of stripping it of its essential context and soul? The very act of using a drone to photograph a petroglyph or a satellite to measure a solstice alignment can, if done carelessly, feel like a violation, a reduction of a living, spiritual text to a mere set of data points. For indigenous communities, the knowledge embedded in a mountain is not inert information. It is relational, earned through ceremony, story, and a lifelong dialogue with the land. A LiDAR scan that reveals a hidden ceremonial platform is a scientific triumph, but it cannot capture the emotional resonance of that place, the prayers that were offered there, or the specific quality of the silence that hangs in the air at dawn. The technology shows us the what and the where with stunning clarity, but it is often silent on the why, the deeper meaning and spiritual significance that give the knowledge its true power and purpose. This creates a critical ethical imperative for modern researchers to approach these digital discoveries not as an end in themselves, but as the beginning of a conversation with the traditional knowledge keepers who have been reading these mountains for generations. The most exciting and respectful work happening today involves a partnership between technologists and elders. An archaeologist might use ground-penetrating radar to identify the likely location of an ancient shrine, but then they will sit with a tribal historian to understand what rituals were performed there and what that place means in the broader cosmology of the people. An AI might be trained to recognize patterns in star lore across hundreds of myths, but its findings are then brought to community storytellers who can interpret those patterns through the lens of their oral traditions. This collaborative model ensures that technological decoding amplifies rather than replaces traditional interpretation. It allows for a beautiful synthesis where satellite imagery can confirm the accuracy of an oral history about a migration route, or where 3D modeling can help a younger generation visualize and connect with a creation story etched into a cliff face their ancestors revered. The goal is not to use technology to explain away the mystery of the sacred peaks, but to use it to deepen our wonder and refine our questions. These tools are giving us new eyes with which to see what has always been there, revealing a sophistication in ancient mountain encoding that we are only beginning to appreciate. They show us that a seemingly random grouping of stones on a remote ridge might be a precise calendar marker, or that a network of trails converging on a summit follows celestial pathways. This doesn't diminish the achievement of our ancestors. It magnifies it, proving that their intuitive and observational science was far more advanced than we ever knew. The mountain remains the same library it has always been. Technology is simply providing us with a powerful new set of lenses and translation guides, allowing us to finally read some of its most complex and beautiful texts, provided we never forget to do so with a sense of humility and a commitment to preserving the living spirit within the stone. So how do we, in our modern lives, begin to access this vast library for ourselves? The beautiful truth is that you don't need to be a seasoned mountaineer or a scholar of ancient texts to start a dialogue with these sacred peaks. The process begins with a simple shift in perspective, moving from seeing a mountain as a backdrop for a photograph to recognizing it as a living presence, an active teacher waiting to share its wisdom with anyone who approaches with curiosity and respect. This isn't about embarking on a dramatic quest. It's about incorporating small, intentional practices into your time in the high places that open the door to a deeper, more meaningful connection. Consider the profound difference between a standard hike and what we might call a mindful hike. On a typical trek, the goal is often the summit, the destination. We push through the burn in our legs, focused on the trail ahead, perhaps listening to a podcast to pass the time. A mindful hike, in contrast, is about the journey itself. It begins before you even take a step, with a moment of quiet acknowledgement at the trailhead, a simple internal gesture of respect for the mountain you are about to enter. As you walk, you engage all your senses. You notice the changing quality of the light filtering through the trees, the specific scent of the soil and pine, the sound of your own breath matching the rhythm of your steps. Instead of rushing, you pause frequently. You might place your hand on the cool surface of a granite boulder, feeling its ancient solidity. You notice a peculiar wildflower growing from a crack in the stone, a testament to resilience. In these moments of heightened awareness, you are no longer just a visitor passing through. You are a reader, beginning to decipher the first lines of the mountain's text, written in the language of sensory experience. This engagement can be profoundly deepened by learning the stories of the land. Before you visit a mountain, take some time to learn its name, not just its modern title, but its original, indigenous name if it has one. A simple online search can often reveal the rich mythology associated with a peak. Was it considered the home of a deity, the site of a great battle in a creation story, the resting place of a cultural hero, knowing that the curve of a ridge is said to be the spine of a sleeping giant, or that a particular lake was believed to be a tear of the moon, completely transforms your perception of the landscape. You are no longer looking at random geology, you are walking through a storybook. This act of learning is a form of respect, an acknowledgement that this place held deep meaning long before you arrived, and it allows you to see the mountain through the eyes of its most devoted readers and interpreters throughout history. Perhaps one of the most powerful and personal practices is the simple act of keeping a mountain journal. This isn't a log of miles hiked or peaks bagged, but a dedicated space for the insights, questions, and reflections that arise during your time in the high places. Bring a small notebook and find a quiet spot to sit. Write down what you see, but also what you feel. Does the vastness of the view make your personal worries seem smaller? Does the patience of a centuries-old tree offer a lesson in perseverance? You might sketch a strange cloud formation, trace the outline of a peak, or press a leaf from a plant you don't recognize. The very act of writing and drawing forces you to observe more closely, to process your experience on a deeper level than a quick smartphone photo allows. Over time, this journal becomes your own personal volume of mountain wisdom, a record of your evolving dialogue with these natural libraries. You'll be able to look back and see patterns, tracing your own growth alongside your deepening understanding of the peaks you visit. Finally, we can move beyond personal reflection to active participation through the practice of eco-restoration or mindful stewardship. The greatest libraries require care, and our sacred mountain libraries are no different. This could be as simple as committing to carrying out more trash than you brought in, or as involved as volunteering with a local trail maintenance organization. Participating in a native tree planting day or helping to remove invasive species that threaten the mountain's delicate ecosystem is a powerful way to translate reverence into action. It is a physical prayer, a way of saying thank you to the mountain for its wisdom by ensuring its health and vitality for generations to come. This practice of giving back closes the loop, transforming the relationship from one of passive consumption to active, reciprocal partnership. You are not just taking the mountain's lessons, you are contributing to the preservation of the library itself, ensuring its shelves remain stocked and its stories continue to be told. Looking ahead, the very challenges that threaten our planet may also call upon the ancient role of mountains as guardians of essential knowledge. As we confront climate change, resource scarcity, and the fragility of our digital infrastructure, we are instinctively turning back to the most stable, resilient features of the natural world to preserve what is most vital. This isn't a retreat into the past, but a sophisticated fusion of ancient intuition and modern innovation, a conscious effort to create arcs of wisdom for an uncertain future. We are beginning to see that the same qualities that made mountains perfect libraries for our ancestors, their permanence, their isolation, their protective mass, make them ideal safeguards for the seeds, data, and cultural memory that will be crucial for generations to come. One of the most powerful examples of this is the global seed vault, buried deep inside a mountain on the remote Arctic island of Svalbard. This isn't just a storage facility. It is a profound echo of the ancient understanding that mountains are the keepers of life's potential. Carved into the permafrost of a sandstone mountain, the vault safeguards duplicate copies of seed samples from nearly every country on Earth. Its location was chosen with incredible care. The geologic stability of the mountain, the natural refrigeration of the permafrost, and its elevation high above rising sea levels all ensure that these genetic libraries, these building blocks of our future food supply, will remain safe even in the face of global catastrophe. This is a direct, modern parallel to the mythical mountains that preserved the seeds of life after a great flood. It is a deliberate encoding of biological knowledge into the mountain's core, a recognition that our most advanced technology is still best served when partnered with the timeless durability of stone and ice. But the safeguarding isn't only biological. As our world generates an ever-expanding universe of digital data, we are also confronting its surprising vulnerability. Hard drives degrade, formats become obsolete, and server farms are susceptible to everything from cyber attacks to natural disasters. In response, visionaries are looking to mountains to host a new kind of archive. Projects are underway to inscribe digital data onto ultra-resistant nickel or quartz glass discs, modern-day petroglyphs, and store them in secure, geologically stable vaults within mountains. The frigid, dry environments found in high-altitude caves or deep within peaks are perfect for preserving these physical backups of our collective digital memory, everything from scientific discoveries and cultural works to historical records. This practice transforms the mountain into a literal backup hard drive for civilization, a silent guardian for the sum of human knowledge in the 21st century, ensuring that a catastrophic loss of our digital cloud doesn't equate to a permanent dark age. This forward-looking perspective completely reframes the imperative for conservation. Protecting mountains is no longer just about preserving beautiful scenery or unique ecosystems, as important as those things are. It is about actively maintaining the integrity of our planet's most vital knowledge repositories. The fight against deforestation on a sacred peak, for instance, isn't just about saving trees. It's about protecting the watersheds that are the source of ancient hydrological wisdom. The effort to limit mining in a revered range isn't just an environmental battle. It's a defense of a living library whose geological formations and oral histories hold irreplaceable lessons on sustainability and balance. When we understand that a mountain is a library, its conservation becomes an act of intellectual and cultural preservation on a planetary scale. We are not just saving a place, we are saving the wisdom within it, wisdom we may desperately need to remember in the centuries ahead. This vision invites us to become active stewards in a grand, multi-generational project. It calls for a new kind of pilgrimage, not just to receive wisdom, but to contribute to it. We can support the digitization of indigenous oral histories tied to specific peaks. We can advocate for the protection of sacred natural sites that hold ecological knowledge we have yet to fully understand. We can even rethink our own personal practices, considering how we might contribute our own stories, our own family histories, or our own local environmental observations to community archives that, in their own small way, add to the collective knowledge stored in these resilient places. The Mountain Library is not a closed book. It is a living institution that is still being written. By seeing ourselves as both its students and its scribes, we honor the ancient relationship between humanity and high places, ensuring that these sacred peaks continue to teach, protect, and inspire for all the tomorrows to come. Throughout this exploration, we've journeyed across continents and centuries to uncover a truth far more profound than simple geology, that mountains function as multidimensional libraries, their very essence encoded with spiritual, ecological, and ethical knowledge. We've seen how ancient cultures interpreted their stratified rock as pages in a cosmic book, how their perfect geometries reflected sacred blueprints of the universe, and how their silent presence served as the ultimate memory palace for oral traditions. From the Axis Mundi concepts that placed these peaks at the center of all creation to the modern scientific validations that confirm their role as astronomical calendars and ecological textbooks, a consistent story emerges. These are not passive mounds of stone, they are active, participatory institutions of learning. They challenge us to see the natural world not as a resource to be consumed, but as a text to be read, a teacher to be respected, and a partner in the grand human quest for understanding. This journey invites a deeply personal reflection. How might you, in your own life, begin to engage with these ancient libraries? Perhaps it starts with a shift in perspective during your next hike, transforming it from a goal-oriented workout into a mindful walk where you listen to the stories the land has to tell. It could mean taking the time to learn the indigenous name and mythology of a peak near you, seeing it through the eyes of the cultures that have revered it for millennia. You might choose to keep a journal of the insights and questions that arise when you stand in the shadow of something so much older and wiser than yourself. Or you could channel that reverence into action, participating in a local trail, clean-up, or supporting organizations that work to protect these sacred natural spaces for future generations. The relationship is yours to define, but the invitation is universal, to move from being an observer of landscapes to a reader of them. If this journey has expanded your perspective, if it's made you look at the horizon with a new sense of wonder and curiosity, we would love to hear about it. Share your own experiences, your local mountain legends, or your thoughts in the comments below. Let's build a community of modern-day library patrons, all eager to decode the world's hidden wisdom together. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into the intersections of myth, nature, and ancient knowledge, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Your engagement helps us continue to explore history's greatest mysteries and share them with you. As we bring our exploration to a close, carry this thought with you. The greatest libraries humanity has ever known were not built of wood and paper which can burn and decay. They were carved by the patient hand of geology, written in the language of ecosystem and alignment, and bound by the enduring spirit of reverence. They are made of earth and sky, and they stand open to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever. All they require is that we show up, not with a library card, but with a curious mind and a humble heart, ready to listen to the oldest stories ever told. If this journey into the world's highest libraries sparked a sense of wonder for you, consider passing that feeling along. Liking and sharing this video helps others discover these ideas and join the conversation. To make sure you don't miss our next exploration into the hidden connections between myth, nature, and human knowledge, subscribe to the channel and tap that bell icon for notifications. Your own stories and local legends are a vital part of this discussion, so we truly hope you'll share them in the comments below. Tell us about the sacred peaks in your part of the world, or a moment in the mountains that felt like a revelation. Together, we can build a community of curious minds dedicated to uncovering the ancient wisdom encoded in our landscapes. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Wherever your path leads you next, may your curiosity remain your compass and your journeys always bring you to higher understanding.